everybody. Today we are going to draw a simplified, made-up version of a three-quarter portrait. The three-quarter view is the one that we see the most often. It is anything between full face and profile. So whether it's turned just a little or whether it's turned really a lot, you have a three-quarter face. Now, because there's so much variety possible, three-quarter faces can be a little bit tricky. But today we're going to learn some of their specifics so that hopefully you can have an easier time drawing them. Did that whole Mona Lisa bit with the AC on. But I wasn't staying dressed up like that for the whole time. No, indeed not. The Mona Lisa is arguably one of the most famous and well-known portraits that we know today, done by Leonardo da Vinci. And the three-quarter view of it was revolutionary at the time, but it has become the standard of what we see in portraits and photography to this day. If you want to know a little bit more about the Mona Lisa, check out this little video. Now today we are going to make up a three-quarter face, which means, disclaimer time, it tends to come out a little strange looking because there are so many varieties possible. When the face turns even just a little bit more, sometimes the features don't match each other. But that's okay. This is a learning process and we are still learning how to break things down to smaller parts. And today we're going to learn how to observe some of those differences that happen when we draw a three-quarter face. Just like in our full face and in our profile, we're going to deal with some basic shapes and some measurements before we start drawing features. And I want to show you some of the things that happen a little differently with measurements now that we are switching to three-quarter. If you look on our skull, in full face, our center line was nice and vertical. On a profile, our center line was the outer edge of the egg. But in a three-quarter view, that center line can be in a variety of places. Also, due to the nature of a human face, the center line also slightly curves depending on where you're putting it, depending on the amount of turn you're going to give. Now we're going to do a nice generic turn, a nice kind of in the middle one, so that we can see some of the things that happen to those features as they turn away from us. I put my measuring lines on Harry here with rubber bands, just so you can see how they would sit again on our skull. In full face, you can see our half, slightly higher than half principal. In profile, you can see that those stay there. And in three-quarter, again, those lines are not going to migrate up and down. But one thing that's going to happen is we're going to indicate a little bit of a tilt of the face. So if the face is tilted downward a little bit, those curves are going to be curved like smiley faces. If the person is looking up, those curves are going to curve more like frowny faces. So we're going to set up curves instead of straight lines for our measuring lines. To draw our made-up three-quarter face, we're going to follow some same guidelines that we did for full faces and profiles. We're going to start off with that whole finger width. We're going to do one egg. We're going to add a second egg, but not as far back as we did the profile. So it's very earthquake. So it's very similar to our profile eggs, but just a little shorter in the back. We're going to set up our measuring lines next, just like we did on our other two versions of the face. This time, though, we are going to put our center line back, but we're going to put it slightly off to the left and curve it slightly. Very slightly. Do not over exaggerate the curve. It will make your features kind of do strange things. Our eye line, halfway. A little higher is okay, because we're going to have our person tilting up slightly. A little lower, you can actually make your person look like they're tilted down. Nose line, halfway. A little higher, because we're going to tilt our figure upward. And mouth line, find the halfway point and shift it up slightly. Now each of these lines, because again I'm having her tilted up, I'm going to curve them slightly downward. Slightly downward. Slightly downward. These do not have to be perfect in any stretch of the imagination, but a reminder, draw lightly so that you can erase these as you go. We're going to start working on our features. Some things to know about the features of the three-quarter face. The eyes are going to be mostly similar to our full face eyes, video above. Our nose is going to be mostly similar to our profile face, video above. And our mouth is going to be mostly similar to our full face mouth. It is a mixing, a mesh of these two different versions of the face. So we have some prior knowledge to help us out. Again, draw lightly and be willing to adjust. Made up three-quarter faces, again, tend to look a little strange to us because there is so much variety possible. If something looks odd, adjust it. Try it a different way. Play around with it to see if you can get it so that you do like it. But don't be too precious with it. Again, we are just learning, and it is okay to make mistakes. To draw our full face eyes, we are going to start with the eye that is facing us. This eye is going to be the one that is turned away from us. So we are going to set up this eye as if it would be a full face eye. You have your almond shape. Be willing to adjust the size. We don't have handy dandy measurements this time. We're going to have earthquake. Our iris is going to be our circle, touching the bottom lid, getting slightly overlapped on the top, drawing it so that we can position the pupil in the middle. Erasing as we go. Eyelid, eyelashes, if you would like, all similar to a full face. Eyebrow, all similar to a full face. Sketch it if you'd like it to look like it was made from hair. Now, this we knew how to do because of full faces. But what happens to this one? What happens when something gets further away from you? It gets smaller, Miss Pontiff. Okay, let's try that. Egg shape, iris, pupil, eyebrow. Smaller, right? No, this won't work. Your eye doesn't shrink just because you turned away from someone. But Miss Pontiff, you don't see the full eye. It does get smaller. You are correct. But instead of getting shorter all around, like I just drew, it gets smaller only in width. You could take this full face eye, position it here, draw the whole thing. Draw an entire full face eye. Notice that an eye the exact same size gets really, really close to the center line and hangs off the edge of the egg. So what you do is you trim the width of it. The height should remain the same, but the width of it gets smaller. So you'll be able to set up that second eye by remembering that your height should be about the same and your width needs to get squished. Again, I like to draw the whole thing and then trim some away. Depending on how much your person is turned, your outer edge of your eyeball can actually flatten and can even be the edge of the face. It just depends on how much they're turned. Iris and pupil are going to be slightly elliptical, but not very. So it's going to fit in your eye well. Pupil, eyelid, and eyebrow. Usually that eyebrow turned away from you goes all the way to the edge of the egg. Again, this all depends on how much your person is turned. This part of this side looks weird. You're right, it does. We are going to adjust that later, this whole side of the face for cheeks and chins and such as, but right now we'll leave it alone. Now, I'm going to check to see that my corners of my eyes pretty much line up with each other. I'm going to check that the height remains the same, and I'm going to check that my left eye is shorter than my right eye in width only. In width only. I'm going to give my eyebrow a little bit more thickness to match my first one on this side. And like I said, a lot of times eyebrow just hangs out the edge of the face right here, and that's perfectly okay. Now, after we set up our eyes, and this went a lot quicker because we already know how to draw eyes based on our full face lesson. Then we're going to set up our nose. Our nose is very, very similar to our profile nose. Again, it depends on how much it is turned. If it's only turned a little bit, it's going to be more similar to a full face nose. If it's turned more, then it's more similar to a profile nose. But the process of it is very similar to what we did drawing the profile nose. Just like on the profile nose, we're going to start at the eyebrow. We're going to angle down to the eye line. If you make this a little curve, it's fine, but not too curved. Just angle down to the eye line. Now on our profile, we did a 45 for the nose. As you can see, this is going to be too big for this face. So you are going to cut that angle a bit. We're still making a beak, caw-caw. And we're still chopping off the tip of it. Chop with our big knife. I'm going to clean up a little bit so we can see what it looks like. And check to see if I like the angle. It's pretty good. Just like our full face and just like our profile, we're then going to set up fishhook for our nostril and lobe for the outer part of the nose. And you have a very simplified, made up 3/4 nose. Now, if the person is turned more toward you, a lot of times you'll see that second nostril peeking out from right here, second nostril and lobe. That's a tricky thing to draw, but it is there. So observe when you're drawing 3/4 faces, especially of people you know, to see if that second little nostril peeks out on the side right here. We did our nose pretty quickly though, because it was very similar to our profile nose. So we got that one taken care of. Very strange and very simplified looking. It's okay. Next up is going to be our mouth. We are going to set it up like a full face mouth. We're going to make them cry from this corner. Push that slightly in. I'm going to match that on the left. Don't worry, I promise it'll work. And I'm going to draw a full face mouth. I'm going to draw that slightly curved opening. I'm going to draw my Cupid's bow top lip. And I'm going to draw my bottom curve. I'm not going to put lipstick this time though, so I'm just going to chop off that bottom line and only put this little bottom curve right here. Now, you know that this doesn't look right. So, think about it. What happened to our eye that was turned away from us? As it turned away, it got shorter in width. Not in length, not in height, sorry, just in width. The same thing is going to happen to our mouth. So, we're going to leave this side alone. Full face mouth on the side that's facing us. And on the side that's turned away from us, we're just going to chop. Chop off that little bit. Chop off the little bit of the bottom one if you were drawing out the lipstick. And you have your made up, very, very simplified 3/4 mouth. Now, if it looks like it's pushed a little too far back, like you're kind of talking out the side of their face, well, push it a little further outward. Maybe your center line was too curved and that made it look like it was pushed too far back. These things are able to be adjusted. In fact, if you notice, the whole time I'm drawing this, I'm going back and adjust things. I'm going back and fixing things so that I like the way that it looks. Now, everybody has a different aesthetic. Everybody likes different things. You're allowed to adjust for your personal aesthetic. Now, we have eyes, nose, mouth. Yay! Eyes like full face eyes, nose like a profile nose, mouth like a full face mouth, chopped off. We have to now deal with this part of the face. This part of the face will show some features. In the 3/4 view, you will see that full face, your egg pretty much stayed smooth, depending on your full face. The cheekbones and the jaw thing going on here. But as you turn, you start to see some variety of shape here on the cheek. It's going to curve in by the eye. You're going to have a little outward curve for your cheekbone itself. And then it's going to come into your cheek and show a little bit of a chin. All that changes depending on how much you're turning. It's all changeable. So be willing to adjust, be willing to erase and try different angles. To adjust this side of the face, I'm going to start at the eyebrow. I'm going to curve in by the eye. About the halfway point of the nose, I'm going to have my outermost point for my cheek, bone itself. I'm going to keep this part of the face fairly straight. Depends on how chunky the person is, how much curve there is there. And I'm going to add a slight little bit to the bottom for the chin. Slight little bit. Now, if you add too much, you'll be able to see that it looks strange. You'll be able to see that something doesn't look right. So again, draw lightly, be willing to adjust so that you can create the face shape that you like. Now, because this is a teaching video, I tend to draw a little too darkly because the camera needs to be able to pick it up. And you can see that I have some ghost lines left behind after doing a little cleanup. You should draw lightly to try to avoid these lines. We don't To set up our ear, we're going to use our eye line and our nose line, just like we have for our previous two versions of the face. If you curve those lines too much, you might end up with an ear down here. You really don't want that to happen. So if you have to adjust those lines to be a little bit more even with the eyes and the nose, I'm going to set it into this back egg here with that same basic shape that we use for profiles. I'm going to put the same little inner designs to indicate some of that complexity that's inside the ears. And then I'm going to do a little bit more cleanup. Our next step is going to be to put in our jaw. If you remember from our profile, from the chin, we just kind of angled it back and pointed it to the ear, but we did not connect it. So I'm going to set that up right here. Again, be willing to adjust so that you like it. Ooh, eraser poo makes very interesting facial hair, especially if using a black eraser. Yeah. Now he's scruffy. Next up, our neck. From the right side of the chin, slight curve down. From the back of the skull, slight curve down. Be willing to adjust, and you have a very bald man. I left the center line here so that I can position my hairline next. This is very, very similar to what we did for our profile. Halfway between top of our egg and our eyebrows, little mark, I'm going to put that line there, and that's going to be the uppermost point of the hairline. It'll come across here on the left, and on the right, just like for our profile, come across, little bit down in front of the ears, little bald spot behind the ears, and you have your hairline. Again, as long as we are covering this much with hair, your person won't look like they're balding. Just like with our full faces, just like with our profiles, we are simplifying our hairstyles, just adding a type of hair, whether it be short and spiky like this or long or curly, and a basic shape to the hair so that you can suggest what that style might look like. One of the reasons we don't fill them in with a bunch of lines is because this can be a jumping off point for painting, shading, color pencils, and you don't want to have to erase plenty graphite lines before you start doing all that. So the fewer lines you put to suggest your style, the better, because then that's less cleanup that you have to do later. Give yourself time to do some adjustments. Give yourself time to really look at it. Put it in front of you, step back from it a little bit, see if there's anything that you would like to adjust or change, and feel free to do that. So that's it. We drew our 3/4 face. And yeah, it might look a little weird because it is made up. It lets you know about some of those important things to look out for when drawing a 3/4, whether it be one that you make up or one that you draw from a reference. The eye that is turned away from you is going to be shorter in width. The nose, as you turn further, you see more of the outer edge of it, therefore it looks a little bit more like a profile nose. And the mouth, one half of it is like a full face mouth, and the other half gets foreshortened, gets chopped a bit because it is turning away from you. All of these different things, all of these tricks and tips are just to help you to draw something that is kind of complicated a little bit more simply. The more confident you are in drawing these things, the more willing you're going to be to adjust and change and try things that you weren't, maybe that you were a little scared to try before. Don't be afraid. That's why people invented erasers. Just try things out. The more you do, the better you'll get. Practice makes better. Never perfect, because perfect doesn't exist. Not in people, anyway. Practice makes better. And the more you practice, the better you'll get. People always ask, what's your best drawing? What's your favorite drawing? And my answer all the time is my next one. Because every drawing I do, every single one, I learn a little bit from. And the more I learn, the better I get. So my next one is always going to be the better one, because I learn every time I try it. Now, some people take years and years and years to learn how to do portraits, especially ones that look like individuals. Give yourself a little leeway to learn, to try things, and to improve. You can do it. Thank you. Thank you for drawing the 3/4 view of the face with me. And I hope you draw more and enjoy what you're doing so you can get better and better.